So, Bob Gilliland, tell me about the first flight in the SR71.
All right, Kelly Johnson was in charge of Lockheed, everything, to every little minor degree. So he had chosen me to be the first test pilot, so I was honored to do that. And I had had plenty of experience being over in the Korean War and then over Europe and flying fighters and checking out different countries with fighters too. So, so we went up to Palmdale, where one of those big hangars had the whole first flight airplane spread apart. And I looked at all of it and I said to Kelly, it looks to me like we won't be able to make it this year. And he said, I said, maybe we ought to postpone it. And he said, nope. He says, if I postpone things every time somebody wanted me to, he says, the airplane would still be in its production jigs. Isn't that the truth? Yeah, that is. And so I just shrugged my, because I wanted to think I was helping him. So then we decided they made it, to my surprise, they got the damn thing ready on the 22nd of December, 64. So the reason he was in a rush to do that, I found out later, was that if he had made the first flight on that airplane, and this was the one with big bucks behind it, more than any of the other similar airplanes, the Pentagon would pay the Skunk Works, his company, big bucks. And so when we had decided at first to sign our names on a little card about everything we wanted to do on the first flight, but not raise the gear. And so that was what I thought we were going to do at first. And then he says to me, how do you feel about raising the gear? And that way you don't have to worry about whether the gear comes down right. And so what do you think about that? And I said, oh, I have confidence in our escape system. I don't care whether we switch to that or not. But if the gear doesn't come down, it's a jump out. And so I said, how do you feel about it? He said, I don't know, let me think about it. So several days later, he says, let's sign a new coupon deal, and we'll talk about doing the pulling the gear up on this flight.
Bob, I heard a story that you have never had to jump out of an airplane.
But I have had a few excitements, like on the F-104 Starfighter. I've done 5 dead stick landings in that, and that's the one that scares a lot of people. And a lot of people don't like it even today because they had so many crashes. And that included the U.S. Air Force in the mid, and it was designed in the mid-50s. And it was because Kelly Johnson had gone over to the Korean War and asked those guys what they want. And they said, we want something that's faster than our opponent, can climb better than our opponent, better guns than our opponent. And that's what he came out with. And that leading edge, if you haven't seen one, is razor sharp. And the first thing you do when you land is they come up and put this thing to protect anybody from the leading edge. Because, in fact, on one of my dead sticks, I landed, and before the meat wagons got out with me, it's low to the ground. I could get out of the cockpit, and these tower had told me it looks like you're flashing maybe fire on one of your wheels. So I sat down there and I looked at my wheel, and I wanted to get under there and look at a little bit. And then on my backing out, I just touched the damn razor. I still got a little scar up here from it.
So the 5 dead sticks landings, that's what got Kelly's attention to choose you as the test pilot.
Maybe in part. Yeah, maybe in part. But he also, I think he was liked the way I was educated in the Naval Academy. And I was good in scholastics also. I learned that because my dad, when I was 13, sent me to this boys' school up near Nashville. I'm from Memphis. And he had me going away from him because he'd been in the same school in 1909, and they were noted for being big-time academics. And so my 2 brothers who were younger than I all went to the same school in the 9th grade. All of us went there and graduated in the 12th grade from there. And so that was good enough to take you in. Oh, and the guy that ran, the President of the United States that ran Princeton, remember who that was? Yeah, Wilson's the guy. He said anybody from that school can have immediate entry into my school up at Princeton. So some of my other friends from that school went to Princeton, including some of my relatives.
You know, Bob, you look like you must be, what, about 6'3"?
Exactly.
Isn't that kind of tall for a test pilot?
Well, I could tell you a little story about that. When I was, they created the U.S. Air Force from the World War II, so it was new thing, brand new thing, and the head of the new U.S. Air Force was named Forrestal, and he's the one who jumped out of a 17-story window in Bethesda and committed suicide. But he was also the first Secretary of Defense, and so West Point said, since this is no longer an Army deal, we're not providing any more boys for this new third service of the U.S. Air Force. And so that Forrestal had to handle that one. So he said, no, we'll make West Point do it here in the first few years until they get their own academy going. And then West Point said, why should we do that? You aren't doing anything like that to the Navy. They're different like we are. So then they said, all right. So the Navy got into it, and the Navy was furious as hell that they got into it at all. And the deal with the Navy was if they didn't get any volunteers, they would get nobody. But this three-star general said he's going to, the guys that came in to the U.S. Air Force, and it would only be 6% of the class, and the total class was about 1,195. And so we had to go draw straws because 15% wanted to do it, and I got lucky and got that. So I went into the U.S. I went into the Air Force. And by the way, my dad and a good friend of his, he was head of the Atlantic Fleet. He was a three-star general down in Norfolk, and he had come up to see my graduation, and he was with, his name is Felix Stump, the admiral, and so they came. It's not everybody that has a three-star admiral come up to see a graduation. So when I was there, the CEO of the whole place didn't know me from Adam, but when he found out this guy was coming up, he was real polite and invited me down to his quarters. You want to know how they got to be friends and did I know him and anything else. So we went through all of that. But it happened that way. They were there for my graduation.
Your son Richard tells me you have a book coming out.
Yes, I have one. And I have a man working on that book. And there's so many other things that could go in the book that we'll probably have a second edition. And soon the first edition will be out, but that'll be missing a whole lot.
Do you have a title for the book?
We have no title for it.
We need a contest.
Well, maybe we can count on Robert to give me ideas.
This is kind of just a little right here. If you can look on the
Dutch 51. Ah, yeah.
51. Excuse me.
51.
That was my code on the SR71 for the first flight and all subsequent flights.
Like Area 51. Ah.
Yeah. It wasn't that. It came out of the Pentagon, but I don't know where they got it, so I don't know what the origin was. It came out of the Pentagon.
Well, Bob Gilliland, if it's okay with you, we're going to start an urban legend here about the title of the book.
I don't know anything about the title yet.
Hey, well, thank you for coming to the LA County Air Show and braving the elements. We got a beautiful...
First got out here and started working for Light, and I was living up here. And I lived over there we're in Palmdale, where the freeway comes out there, and I was a little west of the freeway in a house over there then.
Did it have a chicken coop behind it?
I don't remember if it did or not. But in those days, I was flying here 7 days a week, frequently on the F-104 Starfighter.
A lot of history there, a lot of wonderful history.
That's a great airplane. I loved it.
I know, it looks like a rocket with wings.
Yeah, it really was. Kelly knew how to have a machine like that drag. He had drag optimum. And so it's true it killed a whole lot of guys, but that was because the engine was erratic at first in part, and then a lot of it, the people were not qualified. See, I went over there and taught those Italians how to, and they loved that thing so much they kept it for 40 years, and they call that the S model.
Just like a fine Maserati.
A lot of things about they have. I remember they used to joke about that the pilots and even anybody from Italy were interested in sexy girls, but then they say this thing's a sexy airplane, and all of their pilots thought those too, and they didn't have accidents like those guys up in Germany. The Germans had 935 of the airplanes and wrecked about 200 of them.
Wow. Hey, thanks for coming to the air show.
Pleased to be nice meeting you.
Good to meet you.